Yeah, firstly, I want to express my horror and outrage at the attack on civilian infrastructure, in particular the attack on the Children's Hospital in Kyiv by the Russian military. Absolutely horrendous to see the pictures from that hospital. That certainly seems to be a clear war crime by the Putin regime. In relation to the summit, I mean, this is heralded as a peace summit. Obviously, it's not a summit that ended in peace. It was never a summit that was going to end in peace. I'll quote from Wolfgang Münchau, who is neither a radical leftist nor a Putinist of any sort. He wrote an article in the New Statesman where he said very bluntly that the peace summit on Ukraine failed, deservedly so. Over the 102 state representatives who gathered in Bergenstock in June, 22 refused to sign the final declaration. It was clearly not a peace summit since Russia was absent, but it was also not a solidarity summit. Some of the world's largest countries like India and Brazil were among those who refused to be co-opted into the Western position. This is not how peace is done. And I think that's very, very true. This was in reality a summit of the West and some of their allies. There was notable absences in terms of those who were not present, like China chose not to attend, but also those major countries from the global south who attended but chose not to sign. There were also notable inclusions, and I wonder, did the Irish state have anything to say about the fact that Israel was present and then signed on this declaration condemning all of Russia's war crimes, while literally at the same time committing exactly the same, if not worse, war crimes? Was there no pointing out of the extreme hypocrisy of this? And this creates a problem for countries of the global south to say, why the double standards? They oppose Western imperialism, as some of them may not, some of them may be in the camp of Russia, but some of them may be looking to have a consistent position of opposing Russian war crimes as well as opposing Israeli war crimes and Western imperialism. A concrete question, Taoiseach, is whether Ireland has taken, whether the government's considering to take any initiatives. We are, relatively speaking, in terms of being in the global north, but not a traditional military power, a major imperial country and so on, working with the likes of Brazil. Lula has come out in favour of a peace plan to try to have a real peace process in terms of Ukraine.
Deputy Rory, Omar.
Look, thanks very much, Cahir. Well, firstly, I welcome the fact, and I say this sincerely, that everybody in this House that's spoken clearly condemns the horrific actions of Putin, and I accept that and I acknowledge it, and I think it's important that we say that, particularly after the horror of the Children's Hospital, and I do want to acknowledge that. And just to be clear, not that I expect you to follow what I say at these summits, but I did very clearly say in my contribution on behalf of Ireland that I felt there was that we couldn't sit at a peace summit, and a peace summit that Israel were present at, and ignore the humanitarian catastrophe that is unfolding in the Middle East. I called it out. I think Norway also called it out. Many others didn't. And I did find it ironic that Israel were present at the peace summit. And I did call it out because I thought, I do think there's a real challenge here, and I've said this, I've said it at the European Council, others have said it too, and not that many, but a consistency of approach. Like, this country often gets defined as, are we pro-Palestinian, are we pro this, and we can all have our different perspectives, but fundamentally our foreign policy is grounded in being pro-international law and pro-human rights. And a child is a child is a child, whether it's a child being brutally murdered in the Middle East, in Gaza, or whether it's a child in a hospital in Ukraine. I mean, this country should always call that out. And I do actually believe, and you're right, there's some countries that may not have been at the peace summit for different reasons, including alliances with Russia, so parking that. I believe there are other countries in other parts of the world outside the West, if we want to call it that, or who do challenge us on the inconsistent approach that there is to different conflicts. And there can't be a hierarchy when it comes to international law or to human rights. So I agree that actually the inconsistent approach being adopted by some countries and being adopted by the European Union as a whole in relation to the conflict and the war in the Middle East versus the brutal illegal invasion in Ukraine is actually possibly hampering a consistent global approach being taken. And I think I have no difficulty in saying that because I believe it to be true. In relation to what kind of concrete actions we're taking, well, in my conversations with President Zelensky, and I've had a few at this stage, he does ask that we continue to reach out to countries where Ireland has a traditional kind of track record of support via development aid and others, to ask those countries to come to the table. Because I don't believe, and I heard the commentary that you read out there, Deputy Murphy, and I've heard other commentary to that same degree. You can either adopt a glass half full or glass half empty approach to the Peace Summit in Switzerland. I believe there was value in it, in the sense that it was the largest gathering of countries, of leaders, and of international organisations since the conflict began, since Putin's illegal invasion began. And in that sense, that in and of itself had value. I think there was a lot of work done in the breakout sessions, including that work that I referenced in my opening statement around humanitarian aid, around abducted children, around food supply and food security, that helps, or at least that we must work on in the here and now. But I do also believe that, and by the way, I also believe the fact that there was a broad consensus in relation to principles for peace that do need to respect the UN Charter, territorial integrity, sovereignty is important. I do believe, though, that the next Peace Summit, and I hope there's another one, has to obviously seek to bring more people to the table. And that's a role that Ireland will continue to endeavour to play. And of course, from a concrete initiatives point of view, we continue to assist Ukraine, not just from a humanitarian point of view, not just from welcoming people from Ukraine here seeking refuge, but also through demining, through the work that our ESB has helped. I know one of the big concerns that Ukraine has right now is its energy. It's keeping the lights on, because Putin is particularly targeting energy supply, and also trying to assist in relation to issues around cybersecurity.